Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we are continuing our Start Here series for the 2025 new year, and we're going to be talking about which tech should we use. This is a conversation we've had specifically about video games, and we're expanding it to the music and the shows and the video games, the board games, whatever you might engage, because there is a standard for our families. But more than just giving us the Bible verses, I want to really walk through what those Bible verses mean when we break it into kind of 6 different categories. So we're going to look at the characters, the violence, the language, the themes, the game experience would be it. And then I'm forgetting one, but we'll get there as I get through it. But when we break it down into these areas, these are then our talking points. It's very similar to a reset. When a child comes to us and says, "Hey, mom or dad, can I have my smartphone? Can I get this video game? Can I listen to this music?" And you go, "Hey, I've noticed when you engage this technology, the awesome parts of you that God has wired you for and is raising you up into be an amazing person for his kingdom, they get worse. So no, not right now, but not because I'm mad at you or because I don't understand how cool it is or because of any other reason a child might assume or that might be inferred from or implied by how you are acting. Instead, you can be very clear, like, no, I've noticed you get angry. I've noticed you start lying. I've noticed you become emotionally or relationally isolated. I've noticed you're mean to your siblings or whatever it might be. That's our reset conversation. Relationships and responsibilities, emotion, sleep, enjoyment, time. With our technology then, with the content we engage, it's a very similar process, but it's specific instead of to the impact of our children. That's part of it, but that's not the primary focus of today. Is this content something we should engage just on its face? And the reason that matters is you can actually watch shows that are perfectly fine and still have a reset that isn't. So you can watch a show that passes all of our moral and biblical standards. It's a wise choice to watch and it's fine. And your kid uses it or watches that show, and isn't fine. Okay, that's a reset conversation. That's based on your kid and helping your child know, hey, this might be too far for you. In my life, that was video games. I cannot play video games. I can be around them. I know people who play video games. I'm even in the room sometimes now when games are played. In fact, as part of Young Life, I ran 2 different video game tournaments, like 70 kids. It was wild. We did Mario Kart 1 and then Super Smash Brothers the other half. And there's a gospel message at the end. Like, I'm on board with that, even though I don't play games. But I now know my limits. I now know I can't play a game because I've, tried to make a lot of excuses and be like, I can manage, can't. And trusting the Lord to be better than my gaming is an important part of me being a mature adult father, husband, man of God. Your kid needs the same experience. It's more than just get the moral part right. It's get the healthy part right. But today we're talking about how do we even have that conversation about this content? All right. I hope that isn't burying the lead for some of you that it took me that long to get through it. But I just wanted to explain the context. And if Anna was in the room, she'd be like, just start into it. So we will. Here we go. Characters. Let's talk about the characters in your game or in a movie or in even music. I say music because sometimes musicians will take on a persona to do a song. So Taylor Swift does this, right? She sings as someone who's not Taylor Swift. She's not singing about her life. She's singing about some other character. So it does apply to music. But the character question is simply, would I have this person over for dinner? Would you have this person over for dinner? Your child comes and says, Mom or Dad, can I play this game? Let's watch some of it on YouTube. Pull it up, enter the game name, and then enter playthrough or gameplay, either way. And you can do no commentary. So you're not hearing a YouTube personality. You're just going to watch some gameplay and be like, do I like the way this person handles his or her problems? Maybe you're perfectly fine with it. So, you can think Mario, like, would we have Mario over for dinner? And then you'd go, Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, well, the movie one's kind of rude, but I don't know. Do you watch Home Alone? Like, he's kind of in a similar vein. And then you get to maybe Master Chief with Halo. And then you get to, right, like you get to the guy in Braveheart whose name I'm forgetting. But, oh no, please take my 90s card away from me because clearly I don't deserve it. It's going to drive me wild. All right. Anyway, It's going to come to me while I'm sitting here talking because that wasn't in my notes. But the idea is William Wallace. Yes. All right. Would you have this person over for dinner? And if not, the next question is, can we differentiate that this is not supposed to be someone that we are to enjoy and emulate? But just keep in mind that if they're the protagonist, if they're the one we're rooting for, we are wired as people to follow stories. And the protagonist is the person we're going to be rooting for. So you watch enough movies with bad main characters, it is going to distort a little bit of how we think, especially with the developing brain that is still forming relational norms and social norms and cultural norms. If you're comfortable with that, make sure you've had the conversation and you know how to talk through it. But that's the characters, the first thing we're going to look for because a lot of those conversations stop right there. Absolutely not. I won't let you play this game. Now, do know that there are games where it just doesn't make sense. Like if you're playing Roblox, character falls flat because the game isn't about a character. It's not a storyline. It's all these little mini games. And that game fails really for the game experience, which is the last one we'll come to. But I do want to address it up front that Roblox is a terrible experience for young people because the company doesn't care about some of the content being posted. They've repeatedly said they think they're doing a good enough job, and they've repeatedly been shown, including this last year, when Hindenburg Research did a whole piece on it and saying like, this company is making money on minors and not protecting them intentionally. So Roblox is it's a bad idea because it fails in a different category because you can't keep your child safe or you can't ensure that your child is being kept safe to the best of your abilities because the company itself actually fights you on that. That is not a character issue. The game would pass because the character's fine. It's that you can't stop a child from entering a game they're not supposed to when you said they could play a different one because of the way you basically just portal in. It's a little multiverse of video games. So that's characters and violence. Violence, the question I want to look at is it part of the game? Is it just there and it's a mechanic that you use to solve a problem? Or is it the point of the game? This is a beautiful way to talk about it with our children going down to 5 or 6, because you can say, hey, like, I wouldn't want you to solve your problems this way. So we're not going to solve our problems with like this in a video game. But there are games that are kind of that perfect medium, especially as your kids get older. They're the middle ground. They're what I would call, the Nerf gun fight of video games, and your family needs to talk it out because I have friends who don't let their children have Nerf gun fights. No, it's a simulated weapon. Don't point it at your children or point it at your friends. Like, we're not going to do that at all. Okay. Like in my family, we just got our children airsoft guns for Christmas. So like we are okay with a certain level. I have no research and no evidence that playing with an airsoft gun makes a child more violent or more aggressive or more likely to, go and do terrible things in the real world. We're not seeing that in research or in anecdotal research or in anything. I think it could glamorize certain video games that I do actually believe have some of those impacts on snapping your ability to handle aggression. But because airsoft is slow paced and because it's real life and because it's always with people the way we're playing it, like it checks all the boxes for us. We've made that decision. Now, if you go Fortnite, well, all right, so you're shooting guns that make realistic noises. People scream when they get out or die, but they disappear in a puff of light or a flash of light, I guess. Puff of smoke, flash of light. All right. So which side of it is it for you? Like, is that the Hunger Games where you're now murdering your friends and your peers for individual survival? Or is it just a harmless game of tag and you happen to be using a ranged thing to do that? Like, you need to have that conversation. And by the way, I would argue Fortnite might fail a different category, but maybe not the violence. Your family talks it out. It does not have to be as long as what I'm saying to you now. You say characters. Yeah, I'm okay with you hanging out with this person. Go ahead. A note on that. The reason that matters that they're hanging out with a person is because of mirror neurons. Mirror neurons is what causes you to flinch when you watch a video of someone, falling down really hard and ooh, that looks like that hurt. That empathetic response is because you have neurons in your brain that train your behavior from watching somebody else. That is a concern because you can form parasocial relationships, meaning this person, you don't know them, or they may not even be real. Like, I have strong parasocial and empathetic feelings towards characters that don't exist in the room. Not just like a biography of someone who's dead, but a character that doesn't exist. Like, I like Sam Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. And I like people I have friends who are very Sam Gamgee. I mean, just loyal and hardworking and dedicated and amazing human beings. So Sam Gamgee, I have a parasocial relationship. He doesn't exist. He doesn't know me, but I'm fond of him. The same thing happens in video games. That's why characters is one. That's why violence matters, because it's going to be part of that character. And then we look to the third one. What about the language? Language used by the characters but also language used within the game by other players if it's a live game. This includes language used, and I've talked all video games, and I apologize. I had other examples. Just got caught in the video game vein. So language, let's talk about the music we listen to. Is there an appropriate time to use, hard language that isn't maybe appropriate, swear words? Your family needs to talk about that. Do you just write it off because there's a swear word? Or are you going more with the intent? Like, hey, this person doesn't swear, but they're not kind or gracious or empathetic? Or are those tough ideas that are being shared important and ones that we need to grapple with, and that you can do that with your child or trust your child to do and then bring to you when they have questions? These are ideas we need to talk about. So the characters, the violence, either the violence talked about in your music or shown in your shows. I get this a lot of like, well, why would you care more about violence, or why do you care about violence less than you care about something like sex in a show? And I guess I would go two forms. One, because violence has such a scale of what violence could be. I mean, you could be fisticuff boxing, or you could be, mindless murdering. So we want to think about that. Violence is also something when someone leaves a theater, very few of them struggle with the desire to participate in the violence they watched. Some people do. Whereas when you watch intimacy that was designed by God for two people and no observation, to participate in that as just an observer in the crowd, is not like watching a pugilist match of two people boxing, which is violent, or, MMA or any other violent sport. Those aren't the same thing. They're not the same spiritually. They're not the same physically. And we draw different categories around them. I have much wider boundaries around intimacy and sexual content than I do around violence. But I would say as a culture, it's a great question, because we are a little lax with the way we handle our violence. Like, well, it's not real. Like, tell that to your mirror neurons, which are just getting scorched by some of the content we put in our brains. So violence, and then language, esrb.org. is Entertainment Software Review Board.org. You enter the game name specifically, and it will show it to you. If you want to know lyrics for songs, you can either just enter the song title by the artist and then lyrics, or you can pull it up on something like Amazon Music, and they all the major streaming platforms now show you the lyrics. So you can pull up the song, you can look through the lyrics and just have a conversation, because the language is important. This is why it's important to look at the lyrics of whether it's Megan Thee Stallion or Billie Eilish or whoever it is. Like, Billie Eilish sings some very powerful songs that are coming from real experience, but those may not be experiences you want your children to know. And an example would be our children get to listen to the Hamilton soundtrack, but there's swear words. And so we skip some songs. And there are some words that are accurate, but not helpful. And so then we have to talk through it. Like, well, I won't give you any suggestions in case there's young ears, but there are words where one of our children at dinner last night was like, hey, what's this word? I'm like, okay, we're going to say, where'd you hear that word? And they're like, Hamilton. I'm like, oh, right. That is there. So that for us was a decision we made, mainly because we didn't really think it through. And he didn't actually hear it and put it together. A friend brought it up at school and was like, hey, did you know what this word means? And then we had to have that conversation. Just make sure you're being intentional with the conversation, and that you are willing to do the hard work of the relationship, so that when your child has a question, they go to you rather than Google. That is key. I'm so glad that my son came to me with that word and didn't Google it, because even with safe search and stuff on, none of that is an impenetrable wall. The only real way to make it healthy is to make a relationship established, so that if something goes sideways, your child will run to you rather than into shame, because when they went to Google and it went wrong, now what are you left with, right? My parents said, don't do bad stuff on the internet, and I just did bad stuff, so I guess I'll just hide it. That's not how we want it. We want our children to run to us, prodigal son style, right? Like, I know I made a mistake, and I know my father is loving. Like, I know my mom is loving. I'm going to run to them with this mistake so they can help me, because the first mistake I made was not listening to them. Right? Like, so I might as well not make two mistakes by then not going to them with this one. All right. So then we go to themes after, language, and then playtime. And really what I'm looking for here is, can the game be beaten? Is there an end time? This is one of the ones that Fortnite fails on, because the game is 15-ish minutes. But you never just play one game, because the point of the game isn't to beat it. It isn't to finish a round. The point of the game is to win. And so you want your squad to be the last squad standing. And I was talking to one family, he's like, yeah, we play it only as a family and everyone gets a turn. You die once and then you have to restart. And he's like, the problem is that the kids figured that out. And so now they just run away from all the battles. So he's like, we're getting 30-minute sessions where they're just hiding in little nooks and crannies around the edge of the map. They're not actually playing, but like it takes forever now. So for the whole family to play, it's 2.5, 3 hours for everyone to get one turn. So if you died in 4 minutes, now that's super frustrating. And that's the point of the playtime is 15 minutes of play isn't invested. And now you've progressed towards an end goal. You played 15 minutes and it didn't matter at all because you're starting at minute 0. The next time you jump in, whether it was 5 or 30 minutes, you're always starting back at 0. And that can be very frustrating. And those are tricks those games are using to encourage you to play repeatedly, to practice, which requires time, and generally build a sense of discontent and competition that keeps you coming back. So they're using human psychology to drive game use. Just make sure you've talked about it. This family has decided we're going to do it this way. They actually made rules that you have to fight if someone engages you. Like they have, okay, I'm going to trust you, but just know that when you're talking out your content, if you're watching a series of, let's say, anime, and you have a kid that's into anime and they pick up a series that has 350 episodes, okay, just what is the playtime? What does the engagement time look like that you're committing to? If they're 2-hour episodes for the shows that you like to watch, whatever that might be, just make sure that you have consistent boundaries and an open conversation about, is this something we can handle at this stage of life? We know that the characters are okay and the language is okay and the violence is okay. Like we're okay with all that. But how much time is this going to require us to give? There are beautiful points made by all the important pastors that you've ever heard of. Everyone brings up the point. The most recent one I've heard was Keller and then Piper. But they both brought down the point of like, hey, if you have time to watch or play, engage in entertainment technology for 30 minutes to an hour a day, you have time to read your Bible. And I think that conversation with our children, not as maybe you were raised with this in the 90s, but there was certainly like you have to get through your quiet time so that you can guiltlessly engage in other stuff. But really as a priority, like if the Lord exists and he is the greatest good there is in our life, then we should prioritize that emotionally and energy wise. Like it should come earlier in our day than later. Because frankly, at 9:30 p.m., I don't have time, or don't have energy, even if I have time, to apply the mental effort to do that kind of a study. So where am I going to put that? Because this show is important and I want to engage it. This music is good and it makes me, think deeply or feel alive or work out really well or whatever it is. Okay. But like, where are our priorities in that? We want to make sure we talked about the time it's going to require and does it make sense for the stage of life? Does it make sense in terms of how it's designed to engage us? Are we allowed to walk away from it, or is it just constantly on? Then we have themes. And I almost did just an entire episode on themes, but my goal is to not be a super nerd deep diving. I want to hit a broad spectrum of helpful conversations. So these are all talking points you can go to your kids about the shows, the music, the video games, the platforms in terms of social media that they're engaging. All of these talking points are important. And by the way, if you haven't been on the platform, like if you've never been on TikTok and your kid wants to be on TikTok, like go to TikTok, see how that works. When we talk about playtime, engagement time, TikTok's average videos are 5 to 20 seconds. So you're going to be watching, average use is 43 minutes a day. So we're talking anywhere from like 130 videos to 800 videos in a 40 some odd minute daily use. In terms of engagement time, like never in human history does someone have 5-second conversations with you. Like that doesn't, not person after person after person. Like that's more exhausting than like a wedding greeting line, right? Where you meet every person you know for 30 seconds at a time. Like that's emotionally exhausting. TikTok is much worse. So make sure you at least understand that experience in terms of how is the time being used, how's it being leveraged, and what's it doing to your kid. All right, themes though. Themes is make sure you look at what's being talked about and how it's being talked about. So you can talk about the same subject. So take violence. And there are some people who talk about, this was hard for me. I experienced violence or I participated in violence. And you get kind of a Pauline approach. I did bad stuff and it's real and I'm repentant of that. I'm not celebrating it. I'm not telling you you should do it. I'm not making it look cool. I'm saying it happened and God saved me from it. Super cool. And that would be a lot of the gospel and Christian rappers, right? Whether it's Lecrae or KB or Andy Mineo or Tadashi or any of these guys that like have really cool gospel presentations through some tough lyrics. I get it. Then there's stuff though where you're like, wow, that content of that song was dark and hard. And Billie Eilish again comes up to the top of this where she's addressing tough subjects, but my goodness, if it's not all helpful. There's some things you're like, wow, I actually feel worse about my life because I listened to that. Maybe it helps me feel seen and like helps me process some trauma I've experienced, but I don't know what to do with it. Like, I just acknowledge that this was traumatic. So make sure you've talked to your kids about it. This is true in shows. There are shows where the themes, the messaging of that show is negative, even if the content isn't necessarily. So for an example, Frozen 2, my daughter loves Frozen. We watch a lot of it. Frozen 1, there's a message of like true love. It wasn't because you kissed a prince that you got saved. It was because someone gave up their life for you. And that love is choosing the highest good for the other person. Like, I can get behind Frozen 1. There's some magic. It's all right. It's more on the line of imagination, Mario, Star Wars. And then Frozen 2 comes along and you basically get like a solid 90s new age message where, spoiler alert, she effectively marries herself at the end. I am the one I've been looking for all of my life. I had the power within me. And now that I've discovered it, I can reach my, full emotional greatness and spiritual purpose. That is an important message that you have to be aware is there. There are some Disney and Pixar films that we don't engage because those messages are so potent and strong. And so I would just encourage you to be thoughtful. Like, what is the message about your purpose, about your identity, and how are they getting to that? With music, very much the same. There's some just like pump up. Like if you look up Dude Perfect playlist on Amazon Music, there's just a lot of Zayd Wolf, frankly. And there are a lot of very like pump up, like they sing lyrics that are almost nonsensical, like a Red Hot Chili Peppers album. But it is important to think through, all right, is this person just saying words for the sake of having a pump up song because they sound good? Or is this a message that we are ingesting and that I need to talk to my children about? Make sure you've talked about the themes. And it's true in video games. Almost all major video games. We're talking the ones they spend tens of millions of dollars producing and that have, hundreds of millions of dollars in income, revenue, from them. So even your Call of Duties, I'm sorry, they're not written down. I don't want to just give you game suggestions, but take something like a Call of Duty. Those storylines have a point. They have an argument embedded in there, even like an Elden Ring, which was like a fantastical escape, but it's very dark. And the themes are pretty sad and pretty awful and pretty cynical. So just make sure that as you're thinking through it, or even one that I like to bring up a lot is a game called Returnal. Really cool game, but it's heavy. It's a woman having a mental breakdown. And it is tough if you had a 13-year-old who finished that game and realized what's actually happening. The themes of it would be difficult for them to probably just bring up. So it's not a bad game. I actually think it's a very beautiful way to handle that conversation. But my goodness, if it's going to be tough on a kid, it was hard for me when I actually watched, a friend had suggested it. So I watched the gameplay and I watched someone play through it. And then I watched the end and I had a hard time sleeping that night. And I wasn't even in the one participating in the experience. It's so much more visceral when you're the one who actually got there through your own achievement. I just experienced someone else's. I bring up those games because themes aren't just, is there sex? Is there violence? Is there magic? It's, how is it being conveyed? What's it being said in this show? So again, take Frozen 1, you have effectively a witch, but that's very different than Charmed, where you have these people who are acknowledging we're using the dark powers of the universe, but we're doing it with good intentions. Like, okay, like maybe not, right? Like, let's have a conversation about what this is. There are real witches. Let's talk about the fact that that's, and here in the Northwest, that's very real. I don't know about where you guys are, but Wicca is growing in popularity. You'll find Wicca magazines now in checkout stands. And that's important for us to have a conversation, not because we're scared of it, not because we need our children to never hear the word Wicca. That's a worship of nature and really a worship of self. And we are hoping to dig deep enough into our power and the power of the world around us to make ourselves matter. It's building our kingdom, which is what we're doing every other day. So whether you're making money or worshiping nature, like it's the same thing if we're trying to make our kingdom come and our will be done. And we want our children to know, hey, that is a real option and it's a bad one. because it never leads to life. It always brings death to your friendships, to yourself, to your goals and ambitions, and to your ability to be everything God's designed you to be. So that's why we're against magic, not just because magic, it's bad. Like, it is bad, but there's like a reason. There's a reason God doesn't tell us to go do that as our plan A. It's because it kills us. And it always takes advantage of us and it never follows through on its promises. Actually, kind of like a lot of our technology, which we use as a form of magic to leverage against the world and to gain our advantage and see our kingdom come. So let's say that to our kids. All right. Those are our 6 areas. It was characters, violence, language, playtime, themes. Oh, no, it wasn't. That was 5. And then game experience. Game experience is when we pull in a little of that reset and we're really saying, what does it do to you? When you play, is the fruit good? Like, what happens to you, my child, when you play this game? And this is where some of you will say, hey, you know what? It does fail the time, or I don't really love that character, but I love what it does for you. Or I love what I see come out of this game when you play it and then you walk away. Super cool. So an example would be, I use Mario Kart with Young Life. So, hey, you know what? It's fairly quick. It's a little overstimulating. I don't love that, but man, I love that you play with this group of friends and then you guys go run outside and do your other thing, right? This is my decision-making when I went with Airsoft. Said, hey, I get it. Replica weapons in simulated combat, not my favorite thing. But my goodness, we have a lot of people who are into it. And already my boys have done 3 different 3-hour play sessions in the woods, one of them fully in the rain. And they played and they laughed and they had a good time. And there were some tears, but it always ended with cool experiences, played outside, unable to get overstimulated when you're stalking through the woods. And that was a really cool thing for me to see. I'm watching the fruit of that. If my children start to spiral and all they want to talk about is violence and murder and death, okay, hey, this seems like this has gone too far. We're going to pivot back to a simpler way. Like, we're just going to go back to Nerf or to whatever else, tag, right? We're going to go to a different game. So that being said, what's the game experience? I'm talking about what's the fruit from it. And then the second piece of, what comes out. So that's the reset, relationships, emotions, sleep, enjoyment, time. And the other one is, how is the game designed to be experienced? And this is a little trickier, but I want to focus on 2 parts. First, are there microtransactions? If your game has the ability to make purchases, to gain something in the game, it must cause an alarm to go off in your brain. If that game is saying, hey, come play this game, it's a lot of fun, and for $5 more, you could have a cooler experience. You could look cooler, you could have upgrades, you could win more stuff, whatever it is. So my children play a game, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, called Prodigy. And at first I loathed it. And then it was introduced through school. So I found out about it through friends in a different school. Our school introduced it. My child came home and said, can I play Prodigy? I'm like, all right, we'll check this out. So basically you play through a game. It's like Pokemon. You catch your little monsters. And then every 2 turns, you have to do a math problem. And I was like, ugh, this math is lame. You can't start it at 4th grade math. It just starts very low. But every 5 correct answers, it bumps up a category to the point where now Owen has played it and he's doing well above his 5th grade math level, some pretty intense math problems, and he sits and does them. So we set a 30-minute timer now. So 30 minutes once a week, he sits down and plays that game. He plays it. He does the math problems, and the math problems take 3 minutes or so to do. So he's playing after doing some math problems, maybe 15 minutes. Okay. All right. And the math is good enough and he's motivated enough. It justifies it in my head. But this game in the last 12 months, because then Henry started playing it, has added microtransactions. It's a masterclass in how to add microtransactions. They went from free to play with you could pay a little extra to get places faster, get extra monsters or get extra perks, to a premium membership, pay a couple bucks a month. It's like $6 a month. You get a few more points. You can capture a few more monsters. To now there's 2 forms of premium. The second one is pretty expensive. And oh, by the way, your monsters can't level up past a certain amount unless you spend these special points that you have to get either through playing, which is just a grind, or for a little bit of money, we'll give you the ability to, right? And as soon as you've done that, you're drilling discontent into a developing brain, and that's unfair and uncool. And I am using it as an example of why that's lame to do to kids. So I will not buy the masterclass or the masterclass example of Drool Tech. I will not buy the premium version. I let my children know, no, we're not doing it. We'll play the free version. And if you get mad at it, blame the game developers who made that game engaging aimed it at kids and then said, but we're going to hide it behind a paywall. Here comes your monthly subscription. You pay that up front and say, we run a subscription. If you want to play this game, it's going to cost you X amount per month. I'm not against that. That's a subscription. Everybody does it for things they want. You pay for the shows you want. You pay for the music you want. You pay for whatever, your Peloton. This, however, your YMCA membership. This, however, is different because they're giving you something you want, but then withholding part of it and going, we need a little more money, kid. Give me my money. Microtransactions are mean and wrong, and I do not like them any more than I like it when Snapchat holds your streaks for ransom. You direct message your friends, you miss one, and it says, hey, your streak's going to die and your friend's going to be upset. But if you pay me a little money, I'll give you your streak back and nobody has to know. That's ransom. That's not okay. These are minors. Don't do that. So make sure you've talked to your child about whether there's microtransactions. As I mentioned, Snapchat has it. So social media platforms, in the shows they watch, in the games they play, the music they listen to, are they being encouraged? And the YouTubers that they watch, are those people constantly asking them for a little bit of money that they will get to be part of a special club or whatever? Maybe you're fine with that. So my kids really love Dude Perfect. Okay, if there was a cost to viewing Dude Perfect, I would probably pay it because it's good content that I really enjoy. Or I enjoy for my kids especially. So we just want to make sure that we've talked through that. Is there a cost? The second one then is after microtransaction, what's the game experience like? This is the one that's harder to figure out. Is the culture around the game good or bad? So there are some games that are perfectly fine. You'll watch them and they're fine, but the user base of that game or of the listener base of that music or the viewer base of that show is really negative and toxic. They talk about negative things, they're mean to others, and they pull you into directions that you never intended to go. The only real way to do that is to Google it or throw it on Bing. And you would have to probably do this with Safe Search off to figure that out. You can Google it and see if other people talk about it, but it is tricky to figure out. And I'm just telling you that that's where Roblox would fail. Roblox as a concept is cool. Users make a game, you engage that game, and you get to enjoy the creativity of others. Scratch has something baked in where same thing. You code a game and then you can put it there. People can see the code that you put in and they can participate in playing your game. But Roblox is different because they do not have very many safety measures put in. We regularly put Roblox unsafe into YouTube and watch the videos that come up. People are actively finding very real and very current examples of a lack of safety for young developing brains where it could be avoidable. Other people are managing to make content that doesn't sear your soul and your eyes. Roblox just doesn't care. So that would be, hey, this game, because it's known for that, now draws those kinds of people in, and that develops a culture that's toxic in this game. We don't want you to play this because we can't ensure that you won't run into those people or run into one of those games that is hiding in plain sight as a different kind of game intended to draw you in and take advantage. So that would be an example of a game that fails the culture part of it, not necessarily the fruit, how it affects your kid, but what's the game itself spawning? And there are some games that are just negative. There's some music that's just negative. The culture around it that likes it, even the song itself isn't inherently bad. There's something about it that draws in a crowd that you just don't want your child to become more like. So think about it. All right. Wow. I hope this was encouraging and helpful. My hope in doing this is, one, to make much of Jesus, that this idea of raising healthy youth in a tech world comes from us understanding our identity in Christ, that the gospel is the good news, that God saves sinners. So our job isn't to save our kids. Our job is to love them, assuming that the Lord loves them even more than us. And part of loving them well is giving them all the best tech and helping them avoid the bad stuff. So these talking points are intended for you to engage the best shows, the best music, the best social media platforms, and the best video games based on what you see in characters, in the violence, in the language, in the playtime, in the themes and the way the content is handled, and then in the player experience. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, nathan@gospeltech.net is an email, or you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Love God Use Tech. The YouTube side is new, so this will be, I'll post like the full long video, and then we're starting to get some shorts out there, mainly just from emotional bandwidth. But we understand that people do go to Google when they're looking for hope and for answers, and we want to have great resources there for them. And then would you consider sharing our content with others? If this has been helpful for you, would you tell someone else so that they can be helped as well? Because that is our goal, to help families, to equip families to raise healthy youth in a tech world, kids who love God, who use tech. And then would you join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech?